Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Today, we will be talking about insider threats and attacks, which have become a major concern for organizations of late. And this has only increased since the onset of pandemic because most of us have moved into remote work or hybrid work, and most cybersecurity frameworks fail to acknowledge the fact that these attacks are caused by humans and that these threats can only be prevented if the human element of cybersecurity is addressed. So, in today's webinar, we'll discuss how you can factor in the human element in cybersecurity by integrating user and entity behavior analytics UEBA with zero trust. We'll start off by taking a look at how insider threats and attacks take place and the different types of insider threats. We'll discuss how the human element plays an important role in cyber attacks and how most organizations tend to overlook this while drawing up their cybersecurity strategies. We'll also discuss how UEBA can help mitigate these insider threats by analyzing human behavior and leveraging artificial intelligence, machine learning techniques, and zero trust since it has become like a mandate for organizations. We'll also take a look at how UEBA fits into a zero trust architecture. Lastly, I'll fill you in on the capabilities of a UEBA solution and how you can evaluate UEBA solutions for yourself. Just like I mentioned earlier, insider threats are the major concern for organizations today because they leave behind serious repercussions. Insiders have privileged access to an organization's sensitive or critical data, and they're very difficult to identify and prevent when compared to external threats and attacks. This is because our traditional security solutions are majorly focused on detecting and preventing malicious activity that originates from outside the network and but insiders, they have legitimate access to the network's resources, and it becomes extremely difficult to differentiate between what's legitimate and what's malicious. But the rate at which insider attacks have gone up ever since the pandemic, it has made it more difficult for organizations to monitor the network with employees scattered all across the globe. It has led to the increase in the number of attackers who are trying to exploit the situation or trying to exploit this vulnerability to gain entry into network, cause data breaches and identity thefts and all other sort of attacks. But what makes it even more scary is that these can be as simple as phishing attacks or social engineering attacks. So let's take a look at how insider attack actually takes place. Let's take the example of a disgruntled employee who is about to leave the company. Before resigning their job, they plan to leverage their employee access and steal a large number of critical data and sell it to an external agent who will benefit from this data. So in the first step of attack, they identify the level of access required to get hold of the said data. When they discover that one of their co-workers have the required level of access, they use a brute force attack to log into the target system using their co-workers' credentials. Maybe the password wasn't too difficult to guess, and their co-worker have told them that they like to set a password that are easy to remember, and after a couple of attempts, they gain access to the sensitive data. In the next step of attack, they use a USB drive to exfiltrate the data so that they can sell to the external agent. This way, a disgruntled employee launches insider attacks and steals sensitive data and leverages it for personal benefits and financial gain. But what could have prevented this attack? First of all, they shouldn't have been able to hack into their co-workers account. The company should have mandated stricter password policies, should have enabled MFA, and considering the human element, the co-worker should have set a complex password that only they could remember and shouldn't have let slip that the password was easy. Even after they gained access to the data, they shouldn't have been able to extract it using their personal USB device. If continuous monitoring and UEBA solution were in place, the IT admins would have been notified about the suspicious activity so that the attack could have been deflected. But this incident also reinforces the fact that humans are, in fact, the weakest links in the chain. All of this points to one basic observation. Humans are the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain, as I just mentioned. And as we all know, a cybersecurity solution is only as strong as its weakest link. But this is one of the most easily ignored factors when it comes to deploying a cybersecurity framework. And let's face the fact, humans are fallible and prone to making mistakes. Our passwords are not always complex, and most of us find it easier to set passwords that are easier for us to remember and for the attackers to guess. The same can be said for practicing good cyber hygiene techniques, because at the end of the day, most people tend to skip simple steps like setting up MFA or updating their login credentials regularly. And this is precisely what attackers exploit when they launch phishing scams and social engineering attacks. Attackers exploit human imperfection and carelessness to launch their attacks. It is equally necessary for cybersecurity professionals to factor in the human element while deploying cybersecurity frameworks. These strategies can be as simple as educating people about good cyber hygiene practices, to analyzing human behavior that makes it easier to detect the deviation or spot an anomalous behavior. So I'll just help you understand insider attacks better, and we'll take a look at a couple of types of insider threats. Insider threats are mainly classified based on the intent of the user or the insider involved. So there are compromised insiders who are just type of users whose credentials have been compromised, to someone whose computer has been infected with malware. Phishing attacks are common examples of these types of threats, where the compromised insider just clicks on a malicious link and the rest is history. Negligent insiders are those who do not follow proper cyber hygiene practices and IT procedures. These can be employees who do not lock their computers while stepping away, or can be an administrator who failed to update a security patch. Malicious insiders are employees who steal information and disrupt the normal activities on purpose. These may be employees who look for financial gains, or a disgruntled employee taking it out on the organization. And as a result, organizations have serious impacts such as data breaches, which lead to loss of critical or sensitive data, compliance issues or legal issues due to these data breaches, and let alone the financial impact, and the organization's reputation is at stake at this point. So, insider attack just makes it extremely difficult for an organization to get back to the point where they used to be. And we discussed earlier, insider attacks are difficult to foresee and detect since they originate from within the network. Traditional cybersecurity solutions fail to recognize these threats since their focus is mainly on threats coming from outside the network. And this is where user and entity behavior analytics, UEBA, can help. It leverages AI and machine learning techniques to analyze the behavior of humans, machines, and other entities in the network. It can be routers, servers, devices, and this is used to create a baseline of normal behavior, and any deviations from this indicates that there is a possible malicious activity within the network. It also assigns scores to indicate the intensity of the threat, which allows organization or helps organizations to prioritize their response to certain high risk threats. While traditional UBA solutions only consider user behavior in the network, UEBA solutions go an extra mile to also address other entities such as machines, endpoints in the network, and this provides considerable edge over using UBA solutions in the current cybersecurity landscape. Since machine identities are growing in volume and they're practically outnumbering human or user identities within the network, UEBA solutions can also help you detect a much broader range of attacks, such as distributed denial of service attacks, brute force attacks, data exfiltration, password attacks, and a wider range of insider threats. So basically, UEBA leverages the predictability of human behavior to detect and identify anomalous behavior. This can also be a sign of insider attacks. The IT admins are then notified, which helps them respond to the anomalous behavior and prevent the threat. The employee attempting to download a large amount of sensitive data outside of their normal working hours will be considered as a potential threat. The IT admin will take the necessary action to prevent it. This is basically how UABA works, and it is pretty accurate since it uses AI and machine learning, and the we can also reduce the response time since as soon as the IT admin is notified, he can take a prompt action. To close this human gap in cybersecurity, it is crucial to integrate the technological aspect of cybersecurity with the human element. So, by now, you know that a zero trust architecture has become a must have for organizations to secure their networks. But it's also necessary that we take the human element into account while deploying a zero trust architecture. Zero trust architecture is basically a strategy rather than a solution, and you can always customize it according to your needs. And this is where UABA comes in. It integrates with zero trust, and we can effectively close the human gap in cybersecurity. By now, organizations have accepted that zero trust architecture has become a fundamental security requirement, and we all know by now the underlying concept of zero trust is to never trust, always verify. This makes it well suited to protect organizational networks in the current threat landscape. So we'll just do a quick recap of the core principles of zero trust approach. I'm sure all of us already know it by heart, but we'll just take a quick look. It prevents unauthorized access to data, services, or applications. This is the very fundamental principle of it. In this approach, we can eliminate the idea that trust is binary, and we believe that attackers can be present both inside and outside the network perimeter. To make this happen, we also have to ensure that our access control and security decisions are granular as possible. It'll help us ensure least privilege, and by employing this policy of least privilege, each user is granted access only to the data and the resources that are absolutely necessary for their functioning. This requires access control and security decisions to be granular so that it can prevent exposure, secure the sensitive and the vulnerable parts of the network. Now that we've established that UABA becomes an important component of a zero trust architecture where the primary goal is to defend the network against both internal and external attacks, zero trust mainly focuses towards eliminating the idea that trust is binary, and it just acknowledges the fact that attackers need not always come from outside the network. So, we need a solution that is able to identify and prevent attacks that originate from within the network. Continuous monitoring is a core aspect of zero trust. It shouldn't just be deploying an IAM solution or just authenticating the user, and it shouldn't just end there. We should continuously monitor the user's behavior. It is a core aspect of zero trust, and UEBA leverages this by continuously monitoring and collecting data from across the network to create a baseline of normal behavior. And it's also very effective since the collected data includes a wide variety of use cases and sources. So let's take a look at a couple of core capabilities that you should look for while evaluating a UABA solution. One of the most basic functions of any UABA solution is to collect and analyze data related to users, machines, and other entities in a network from a wide range of sources like event logs, firewalls, servers, databases, and contextual data from other network devices. Continuously monitoring and analyzing these data from multiple sources will ensure that at no point the network is left unmonitored, or that the anomalous behaviors are detected with precision. It'll also make it easy to integrate the UEBA solution with existing solutions in the network. Another very critical capability of a UEBA solution is to reduce the rate of false positive alerts, reduce alert fatigue, and then detect threats with more precision. So, this can only be achieved by obtaining meaningful security context. So, this is generally done by correlating multiple actions of a user to uncover or identify suspicious patterns. Contextual data, it can include the user's identity information or geolocation or external threat intelligence and any such other data. This actually greatly helps reduce false positive alerts and ensure precision. We usually leverage machine learning techniques to deduce this pattern of user and entity behavior, and it's a core feature of any UEBA solution. Machine learning algorithms help a great deal in analyzing this data from different sources and drawing a baseline of normal behavior based on patterns in the behavior of users and entities. Since UABA solutions are likely to flag a sizable number of suspicious activity within the network, it is critical to prioritize incident response to prevent the most dangerous threats before they can cause too much damage. This is where score based risk assessment comes into play. So basically, the UEBA solution maintains a risk score for every single user or entity profile within the network. And every time an user or an entity deviates from the baseline of normal behavior, the risk score increases, and the one with the highest risk score will be prioritized and investigated first. This makes sure that the high risk incidents are attended to immediately and that the potential security incidents are mostly prevented. As we've been talking about insider threats since the beginning of the webinar, one of the main reasons for deploying a UEBA solution is to detect insider threats and activities associated with data exfiltration or account compromise. So, a good UEBA solution must be able to detect all of these and more with ease and create alerts for the same. So, some of the signs that indicate insider threats are like access at odd hours or unusual times, unauthorized file access and modification, and high frequency of authentication failures within a very short period of time, and abnormal or any anomalous access patterns. So, these are the signs that shows that there is probably an insider within the network. But what indicates that this insider is exfiltrating data is a little different. So maybe when multiple USB drives and external storage devices are plugged in by the user, we can probably be alerted that they're probably trying to exfiltrate data from the network, some suspicious commands executed by the user, or some logon activities from unusual locations, and abnormal download patterns of critical and sensitive data. All of this points us to one direction, that there probably might be a data exfiltration happening at this point within the network. We should also be able to identify account compromise. We can look out for these signs where there are multiple instances of software being installed on a specific host, or there are multiple logon failures, or there is some irregularity in access locations, or installation of some unauthorized softwares. We should be able to proactively look out for these signs. The machine should be able to look out for these signs and create alerts when something of this sort happens. The function of a UEBA solution doesn't end with identifying deviation from normal behavior or anomalous activities. A good UEBA solution must be able to send out automated alerts and notifications when malicious activity is suspected, so that the IT security team would be able to respond to it right away and prevent the threat. And this is where UEBA solutions can integrate with AI and ML algorithms to automate these alerts and also the threat response. Consolidating all of these gathered data into an easy to view and actionable report or a dashboard is a very critical function of a UABA solution. It's important to regularly view these reports to make sure that the activities taking place within the network are not flagged incorrectly. This will also help us to gain insights into how you can customize your UABA solution and how it can comply with your organization's security norms. So, we've discussed throughout this webinar how integrating UEBA into zero trust architecture goes a long way in bridging the human gap in cybersecurity and preventing attacks that exploit the human tendency to make mistakes. So, we can try to make UEBA part of our zero trust strategy, and by this way, we'll be able to keep a check on activity that goes on within the network and also prevent insider attacks to a large extent. Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. My email ID is on the screen. If you wish to start up a conversation on insider threats or zero trust or anything related to cybersecurity, please ping me. Would love to have a conversation with you. Thank you again for joining today's webinar, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Thank you.